The massive space station hung in the dark like a giant metal flower. Its spinning arms stretched out in all directions, each one big enough to hold a small city. This was Nexus Prime, the meeting place where all the different alien races came together to talk about important things. Today they were all scared. Captain Jake Martinez sat in his chair and watched the chaos around him. He was a human, which meant most of the other beings in the room tried not to look at him. They were afraid of what they might see. Humans came from a planet that was so dangerous it made warriors out of everyone who lived there. The other races called them Deathworlders, and they said it like it was a curse word. The big meeting hall was filled with creatures that looked like nothing, as Jake had ever imagined as a child. There were tall beings made of living crystal who spoke by changing colors. There were floating gas clouds that somehow had thoughts and voices. Bug-like creatures with too many eyes clicked and buzzed at each other in their corner. All of them were talking about the same thing, and all of them sounded terrified. Commander Lisa Brooks sat next to Jake, reading reports on her tablet. She was his second in command on the ship New Horizon. Lisa had short brown hair and calm eyes that never seemed to get excited about anything. Right now, she was frowning at the screen. "The numbers keep getting worse," she said quietly. 3 more star systems went dark yesterday. That makes 17 in the past month. Jake nodded but kept watching the aliens argue with each other. He could understand most of what they were saying because of the translation devices everyone wore. The crystal beings wanted to hide in the center of the galaxy where it was safer. The gas creatures thought they should scatter to different parts of space. The bug people were talking about building bigger weapons, but their voices shook when they said it. None of them were talking about fighting back. They were all just trying to figure out the best way to run away. The thing that scared them so much had a name that made grown aliens wake up screaming. They called them the Void Hunters. According to the old stories, these creatures were older than most of the civilizations in the galaxy. They lived in the empty space between galaxies, sleeping for millions of years at a time. When they woke up, they were hungry. Very hungry. The Void Hunters flew around in ships that were actually living creatures. These bioships were as big as moons and could eat entire planets. They would come to a star system, consume everything that lived there, and then move on to the next one. The story said they had done this before, long ago, but everyone thought they were just fairy tales to scare children. Now the fairy tales were coming true. A loud sound filled the meeting hall. It was the signal that someone important wanted to speak. Jake looked up and saw Ambassador Helen Carter walking toward the speaking platform. She was Earth's main representative to the galactic community, a smart woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. As she walked, Jake noticed how the other beings moved away from her. Some of them actually shivered. Helen stepped up to the platform and waited for the noise to die down. The crystal beings stopped changing colors. The gas creatures stopped floating around. Even the bug people stopped clicking at each other. When a human wanted to talk, everyone listened. They were too afraid not to. "Fellow representatives," Helen began, her voice clear and strong. "We have heard many ideas today about how to survive this threat. All of them involve running away. I want to propose something different." A wave of worried sounds filled the hall. Jake saw several aliens actually move farther back in their seats. Helen continued. "Earth offers to coordinate a defense against the Void Hunters. Humanity will lead the fight to stop them before they reach the core worlds." The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the air recycling systems humming. Then the noise started. It was like someone had kicked over a nest of angry insects. Creatures were shouting, buzzing, glowing, and making sounds that the translation devices could not even turn into words. The loudest voice belonged to the crystal being, called Prime Speaker 7 Alpha. It was the leader of the Zephyrian Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. When it spoke, its whole body flashed bright red, which Jake knew meant anger. "The humans suggest we trust our survival to Deathworlders," 7 Alpha said, its voice like the sound of breaking glass. "These beings come from a planet so violent that every creature on it is a natural killer. They solve every problem with weapons and death. They're barely civilized savages who learn to build spaceships. We need wisdom and careful planning, not the mindless violence of primitives. Other voices joined in. The gas creatures whispered that humans were too dangerous to be trusted with anything important. The bug people clicked rapidly about how humans killed their own kind in wars that lasted for years. Everyone had stories about human violence, human cruelty, human madness. Jake felt his hands tighten into fists, but he did not move. He had heard all of this before. It was true that Earth was a dangerous planet. It was true that humans fought wars and killed each other. But there was more to the story than that. The other races only saw the violence. They did not see the reasons behind it. Helen waited for the noise to die down again. Her face showed no emotion, but Jake could see the tiny muscle in her jaw that always twitched when she was angry. "You speak of our violence," she said. "You are correct. Humans are capable of great destruction. But you forget something important. We are also capable of great sacrifice. We fight not because we enjoy killing, but because some things are worth dying for." Pretty words, 7 Alpha flashed. But words do not stop moon-sized monsters from eating planets. We need real solutions, not Deathworld philosophy. The debate went on for hours. Different species proposed different plans. Some wanted to build giant shields around their home worlds. Others suggested hiding in deep space until the Void Hunters got bored and left. A few talked about trying to negotiate with the creatures, even though no one had ever successfully communicated with them. Jake noticed something that the others seemed to miss. Every plan involved giving up huge parts of the galaxy. The outer colonies would be abandoned. Entire civilizations would be left to die, while the core worlds tried to protect themselves. Billions of beings would be sacrificed so that the lucky few could survive. As the meeting finally ended, Jake watched the different groups file out. They moved in clusters, staying close to their own kind. Many of them looked over at the human delegation with expressions that were easy to read, even on alien faces: fear, disgust, suspicion. The final vote was not even close. The Galactic Council decided to fall back to the core systems and build defenses there. No one wanted to fight, no one except the humans. As the hall emptied, Jake stood up and stretched. Lisa was still reading her reports, but now she looked worried. "Jake," she said quietly, "look at this pattern analysis." She handed him the tablet. On the screen was a map of the galaxy showing which star systems had been attacked by the Void Hunters. At first it looked random, but when Jake studied it closer, he saw what Lisa had found. The attacks were not random at all. They were following a pattern. The Void Hunters were not just eating everything they found. They were pushing the other races exactly where they wanted them to go. Every attack forced more refugees toward the core systems. Every destroyed world made the survivors more afraid, more willing to abandon the outer colonies. "They're hurting us," Jake said. Lisa nodded, like sheep. "They're driving everyone toward the center of the galaxy, where all the populations will be concentrated in a smaller area." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Void Hunters were not just mindless eating machines. They were smart. They were patient, and they had done this before, probably many times. The other races thought they were running to safety. Instead, they were walking right into the biggest trap in galactic history. 3 weeks had passed since the meeting at Nexus Prime. The human fleet now floated in space. Near the edge of the Kepler Nebula, a giant cloud of colorful gas and dust that sparkled like jewels against the black. The ships looked small next to the massive nebula, but Admiral Sam Walker knew they were the biggest fleet humanity had ever put together. Sam stood on the bridge of his flagship, huge warship called the Defiance. Through the wide windows, he could see the other ships in his fleet. There were 200 of them in total. Some were small and fast destroyers that could zip around like angry wasps. Others were massive carriers that held hundreds of fighter ships in their bellies. The biggest were the dreadnoughts, like his own ship, floating fortresses covered in weapons. It was an impressive sight, but Sam knew it was not nearly enough. The reports from the outer systems told a terrible story. The Void Hunters had ships that were as big as small moons. They had weapons that could crack planets in half. His entire fleet would be like a pack of dogs trying to fight a dragon. Dr. Amy Rodriguez walked onto the bridge carrying a tablet full of information. She was the fleet's expert on alien life forms. A small woman with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Sam had worked with her before on other missions, and he trusted her completely. If anyone could figure out how to hurt these creatures, it would be Amy. "Admiral," she said, "I have the latest analysis on the Void Hunters." Sam turned away from the windows. Around the bridge, his crew continued their work. These were good people, the best humanity had to offer. They all knew they were probably going to die out here, but none of them had asked to go home. "What did you find?" Sam asked. Amy touched her tablet, and a hologram appeared in the air above them. It showed one of the Void Hunter bioships, a horrible, a thing that looked like it was made of living meat and metal mixed together. The surface moved and breathed like it was alive. Weapon ports opened and closed like hungry mouths. Smaller creatures swarmed around it like bacteria around an infection. "These things are older than most of our recorded history," Amy said. "We think they first appeared about 50 million years ago. They sleep in the empty space between galaxies for millions of years at a time. When they wake up, they need to eat a lot." Commander Paul Johnson, Sam's second in command, studied the hologram with a frown. Paul was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his younger days as a Marine. He had seen combat on a dozen different worlds, but nothing like this. "How do they reproduce?" Paul asked. "That's the terrifying part," Amy replied. "Eat entire planets to gather the materials they need to make more of themselves. One bioship can become 10 if it consumes enough organic matter. They're not just hungry. They're trying to multiply." Sam felt his stomach turn. "How many systems have they hit so far?" 23 confirmed destroyed, Amy said. "But our scouts think there are more that we just haven't found yet. They're moving faster now, like they're in a hurry." Captain Nina Torres entered the bridge at that moment. She commanded one of the fleet's stealth ships, a vessel called Shadow, that could hide from almost any sensor. Nina was tall and thin with short black hair and the kind of quiet confidence that came from surviving dangerous missions. Her ship had just returned from a scouting run to the Rigel sector. "Admiral," she said, "you need to see this." Nina activated her own hologram projector. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge go quiet. It showed a star system that had once been home to 12 billion people. Now there was nothing left but empty space and a few chunks of rock floating where planets used to be. "The Helix colony," Nina said. "They got it 2 days ago. The bioship that did this was 3 times bigger than anything we've seen before. Our long-range sensors picked up its trail heading toward the core systems." Sam stared at the image. He had visited Helix colony once, years ago. It had been a beautiful place with floating cities and gardens that stretched for miles. Now it was gone, consumed by something that saw entire civilizations as nothing more than food. "How long do we have?" he asked. Nina checked her notes. "Based on their current speed, the main force will reach the core systems in 6 weeks. Maybe less if they don't stop to feed again." The bridge fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. The core systems held trillions of beings from dozens of different species. If the Void Hunters reached them, it would be the greatest massacre in galactic history, Sir Paul said carefully. "The other fleets are falling back to defensive positions. Around their homeworlds, the Zephyrian Empire has pulled all their ships back to protect their crystal cities. The Nephilim gas dwellers are hiding in deep space. Even the Chitauri bugs are building bunkers instead of fighting." Sam nodded. He had expected this. The other races were good at many things, but they were not good at accepting losses. They would rather sacrifice their outer colonies than risk their core populations. It was a logical choice, but it meant abandoning billions of people to death. "What about Earth's orders?" Emmy asked. Sam pulled up a message on his personal tablet. It was from Earth Command, signed by the President herself. The words were simple, but clear. Humanity would not abandon the galaxy to these creatures. They would fight, even if they were the only ones willing to do so. "We stand and fight," Sam said. "That's what humans do." Dr. Amy Rodriguez looked at the hologram of the Void Hunter bioship again. "Admiral, there might be a way to hurt them." but it would require getting very close to one of these creatures, close enough to study it in detail. How close? Nina asked. Close enough to touch. Amy replied. The bridge fell silent again. Everyone knew what that meant. Getting close to a Void Hunter bioship was suicide. Creatures were covered in weapons and surrounded by swarms of smaller organisms that attacked anything that came near. No one had ever gotten close to one, and lived to tell about it. I'll do it, Nina said, without hesitation. Nina, Sam started to say. No, sir, she interrupted. Shadow is the only ship that might be able to get close enough. My crew knew the risks when we signed up for this mission. Looked around the bridge at his officers. These people were the reason humanity had survived everything the galaxy had thrown at them. They did not run when things got dangerous. They stepped forward. Lieutenant Commander Greg Thompson, the fleet's tactical officer, pulled up a star chart. Greg was young for his rank, but he had a mind that could see patterns others missed. He had been studying the Void Hunter attack routes for weeks. Sir, he said, I think I know where they're going next. If we're going to try this crazy plan, we need to move fast. Greg highlighted a system called Avalon on the star chart. It was a peaceful place with 3 inhabited planets and several space stations. About 8 million people lived there, mostly farmers and researchers. The Void Hunters will hit Avalon in 4 days, Greg said. It's right on their path to the core systems, and it has the kind of organic matter they seem to prefer. If we can get there first, we might be able to study one of them when it arrives. Sam looked at the faces around him. These were good people who had families back on Earth. They had lives they wanted to return to. But they also understood what was at stake. If humanity did not stop the Void Hunters here, no one would. All right, he said. We go to Avalon, Nina. Get your team ready for a close encounter with one of these things. Amy, figure out what you need to learn about them. Greg, start planning our escape route. What about the people on Avalon? Paul asked. Sam thought about that for a moment. 8 million innocent people were about to become bait in humanity's desperate plan to save the galaxy. It was not fair, but war was never fair. We evacuate as many as we can, he said. But some will have to stay to make it look normal when the Void Hunter arrives. Can't let it know we're waiting for it. As his officers left to prepare for the mission, Sam stood alone on the bridge looking out at his fleet. 200 ships and 50,000 brave souls, all ready to die if it meant saving others. The galaxy saw humans as violent monsters from a death world. Maybe that was true. But sometimes the galaxy needed monsters to fight other monsters. Fleet began moving toward Avalon and toward a battle that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The small stealth ship Shadow drifted through space like a ghost. Captain Nina Torres sat in her command chair, watching the scanner displays with calm eyes. Around her, the bridge was dark and quiet. Every system that was not absolutely necessary had been shut down to avoid detection. They were hunting the most dangerous predator in the galaxy, and they could not afford to make any mistakes. Dr. Amy Rodriguez floated next to Nina in zero gravity, her eyes fixed on the biological scanner. Readings. She had never seen anything like the data that was streaming across her screens. The Void Hunter bioship was still 3 hours away from Avalon system, but her instruments could already detect its presence. The thing was so massive that it bent space around itself like a small planet. Systems specialist Katie Morgan worked at her station near the back of the bridge. Katie was young, barely 25, but she was the best computer expert in the human fleet. Her job was to record everything. They learned about the creature and get that information back to Admiral Walker, no matter what happened to Shadow. Contact in 90 minutes, Nina said quietly. The rest of her crew knew what that meant. They were volunteers, all of them. When Admiral Walker had asked for people willing to fly a suicide mission, every person on Shadow had stepped forward. They understood that someone had to do this job, and they were the only ship that might be able to get close enough to the Void Hunter. Without being detected immediately, Lieutenant Brad Collins piloted his fighter ship alongside Shadow. Brad was Nina's wingman, a young pilot with steady nerves and quick reflexes. His fighter was loaded with sensors instead of weapons. If something happened to Shadow, his job was to get the data back to the fleet. It was not much of a plan, but It was the best they had. Target acquired, Katie announced. On the main screen, a dot of light appeared against the stars. As they watched, the dot grew larger. Within minutes, they could see the true shape of the thing that was heading toward Avalon. Dear God, Amy whispered. The Void Hunter bioship was bigger than Nina had imagined, stretched out like a living mountain, its surface covered in what looked like skin and metal fused together. Organic tubes ran along its sides like veins, pulsing with some kind of fluid. Weapon ports opened and closed in a steady rhythm like breathing. The whole thing looked alive and hungry, and completely alien. Smaller creatures swarmed around the bioship like insects around a rotting log. Some were the size of fighters, others as big as destroyers. They moved in patterns that seemed random, but were probably following some kind of biological program. Nina counted at least 200 of them, maybe more. Getting detailed scans now, Amy reported. Her instruments were working overtime, recording everything they could about the creature. The data would be sent back to the fleet in real time through a quantum communication link that Katie had rigged up. Even if Shadow was destroyed, the information would survive, Amy said, her voice tight with excitement and fear. This thing is not just a ship. It is a living creature. The hull is actually skin. Those weapon ports are organs. And the smaller things around it are not separate ships. They are part of the same organism. Nina felt her blood run cold. You mean like organs? More like white blood cells? Amy replied. They protect the main body from infection, or in this case, from us. On the screen, the bioship continued its approach toward Avalon. The 3 planets in the system looked tiny next to the creature. Nina could see the space stations where evacuation ships were still loading refugees. Admiral Walker had managed to get most of the population out, but several 100,000 people remained. They were the bait that would make the Void Hunter think everything was normal. It is slowing down, Katie reported. The bioship had detected the life signs from Avalon. Now it began to change shape, extending feeding appendages toward the planets like a giant squid reaching for food. The appendages were kilometers long and covered in what looked like mouths. We need to get closer, Amy said. I need detailed readings of its nervous system. Nina looked at her crew. They all knew what getting closer meant. The bioship was surrounded by those protective organisms, and they would attack anything that came near. Shadow was fast and quiet, but it was not invisible. Take us in, Nina ordered. The stealth ship crept forward, moving slowly to avoid making too much noise. Nina's pilot was excellent at his job, using the gravity fields of nearby asteroids to mask their approach. For 20 minutes, everything went according to plan. Then one of the smaller organisms detected them. Contact, the pilot announced. We have been spotted. Alarms started ringing throughout Shadow. Protective organisms around the bioship were turning toward them, moving fast. Nina could see them on her screen, dozens of living missiles heading their way. Brad, she said into her radio. Stay back and record everything, Nina. I can help, Brad replied. No, your job is to survive and get this data home. The first organism reached them 30 seconds later. It looked like a cross between a shark and a jellyfish, with tentacles that sparked with electricity. Shadow shook as the creature slammed into their hull. Hull breach in Section 4, Katie reported. Sealing emergency bulkheads. More organisms arrived, swarming over Shadow like antibodies attacking a virus. The ship's defenses fired automatically, but there were too many targets. Nina felt the deck shake under her feet as something tore through the outer armor. Amy, how much more time do you need? She asked. 2 more minutes for a complete neural map, Amy replied. Still working at her station, even as sparks flew around her, Nina made a decision that she knew would probably kill them all. Full power to the sensors. Stop worrying about stealth.
Shadow
Suddenly blazed with electronic signals as every scanner came online at once. The organisms attacking them went into a frenzy, but Amy got the data she needed. Her instruments recorded the complete structure of the Void Hunter's nervous system, mapping every neural pathway and biological circuit. Got it, Amy announced. Katie, transmit everything to the fleet. Transmitting now, Katie confirmed. On her screen, Nina watched the bioship begin feeding on Avalon's first planet. The feeding appendages wrapped around the world like tentacles, and the surface began to glow as everything living on it was consumed. Entire cities disappeared in seconds. "This is not just eating," Amy said, watching her readings. "It is converting organic matter into new bioships. Look at the energy patterns." Nina saw what Amy meant. The bioship was not just consuming the planet, it was using the organic material to grow new sections of itself. Small bulges appeared along its sides that looked like eggs or cocoons. A few days, they would probably hatch into new void hunters. "We need to get out of here," the pilot announced. The ship was falling apart around them, systems failing one by one. But Nina had seen something else on the scanner displays. The neural patterns that Amy had recorded showed something important. The bioship was not just one creature. It was thousands of smaller organisms, all linked together by bioelectric fields. They shared a single consciousness, like cells in a body. "Amy," she said urgently, "the neural network, can it be disrupted?" Amy looked at her readings. "Theoretically, yes. If you could introduce a virus into the bioelectric field, it might confuse the whole system. The organisms might turn on each other." An explosion rocked Shadow as another organism broke through the hull. Emergency lights flashed red as the bridge filled with smoke. Nina knew they had maybe 1 minute before the ship came apart completely. "Brad," she called on the radio, "did you get all that?" "It's every word," Brad replied. His fighter was all ready, racing away from the battle, carrying the precious data back to Admiral Walker. "Tell the Admiral that we found their weakness," Nina said. "But someone has to get close enough to plant a virus in their nervous system." "Real close." Shadow shuddered as something vital exploded deep in the ship. The lights went out, leaving only the glow from the instrument panels. Through the windows, Nina could see more organisms converging on their position. "It has been an honor serving with you all," she announced to her crew. The ship broke apart 30 seconds later, consumed by the same creatures they had been studying. But the data survived, racing through space toward the human fleet at the speed of light. Admiral Walker received the transmission just as Avalon's second planet began to glow with the same terrible light. He read Amy's findings twice, then called his senior staff to the briefing room. "We know how to kill them," he announced. "But it will require volunteers for a mission that no one can survive." Around the table, every captain in his fleet leaned forward. They had all heard Nina's final transmission. They knew what was needed, and they all knew that humans had never been good at backing down from impossible odds. The human fleet moved through space toward the Centuri gate like a pack of wolves heading into battle. Admiral Sam Walker stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the stars ahead. Intelligence reports said that 7 Void Hunter bioships would meet at this location. It was the last major hyperspace junction before the core systems wear. Trillions of people waited in fear. Sam had been a soldier for 30 years. He had fought pirates in the Outer Rim and rebels on colony worlds. He had seen men die and had sent others to their deaths. But he had never faced anything like this. Today, his entire fleet would probably be destroyed. Everyone knew it. Everyone had volunteered anyway. "Fleet status report," he called out. Commander Paul Johnson checked his displays. "All ships ready, sir. 200 vessels in formation. Biovirus payloads loaded and armed." The biovirus was Dr. Amy Rodriguez's final gift to humanity. Before she died on Shadow, she had figured out how to create a computer virus that could attack the Void Hunter's shared consciousness. But the virus had to be planted directly into each bioship's nervous system. That meant someone had to fly into those creatures and find their brain centers. "Communications," Sam said. "Open a channel to the entire fleet." A moment later, every ship in the human fleet could hear his voice. Sam thought about what to say. These people were about to die. For beings who had called them monsters and savages, they were going to sacrifice themselves for a galaxy that feared them. "Today, we fight not as conquerors or destroyers," Sam began. "We fight as protectors. The other races see us as Deathworlders, creatures from a planet so dangerous that it made killers out of all of us. They are right about our world. Earth is A dangerous place. But they are wrong about what that means. He paused, looking out at the stars where his people would soon die. Being from a death world does not make us monsters. It makes us survivors. It makes us willing to do what others cannot. Today, we stand between the darkness and everything that lives. Today, we show the galaxy what humans really are. The response from his fleet was immediate. 200 captains acknowledged his words, their voices calm and ready. These were people who had looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. It was the most human thing Sam could imagine. Enemy contacts detected, announced Lieutenant Commander Greg Thompson from his tactical station. 7 large bioships emerging from hyperspace. The main screen filled with images that would give anyone nightmares. The Void Hunters came out of hyperspace like living nightmares, their bioships stretching across kilometers of space. Each one was different, grown from the organic matter of different worlds. One looked like a giant spider with weapons for legs. Another resembled a massive jellyfish with tentacles that crackled with energy. The largest bioship was the one that had destroyed Avalon. Sam recognized it from the recordings that Brad Collins had brought back. It was covered in scars from their earlier encounter, but it had grown even bigger. New sections bulged from its sides where it was creating offspring from the organic matter it had consumed. Deploying screening forces, Greg reported swarms of smaller organisms poured out of the bioships like angry hornets. There were thousands of them, each one the size of a fighter, but moving with biological unpredictability. They formed clouds of living missiles around each bioship. All ships, Sam announced. Execute Attack Plan Alpha. Remember, someone has to plant the virus in each bioship, no matter what the cost. The human fleet split into 7 attack groups, each one targeting a different bioship. Captain Jake Martinez led the first group toward the largest creature, the one from Avalon. His ship New Horizon was fast and well-armed, but it looked like a toy next to the bioship. Jake's attack group dove straight into the swarm of organisms surrounding their target. Creatures moved to intercept them, firing streams of acid and bioelectric energy. Jake watched 3 of his escorts disappear in balls of green fire, but he kept flying toward the bioship's hull. Dr. Rodriguez would be proud. Commander Lisa Brooks said from her position next to Jake. She was carrying one of the biovirus payloads, ready to plant it in the creature's nervous system. She gave us the weapon, Jake replied, dodging a cluster of attacking organisms. Now we have to use it. New Horizon punched through the bioship's outer defenses and slammed into its hull. The surface was soft and wet, like landing on living tissue. Jake fired his ship's drill weapons, boring a hole through the creature's skin. Acidic blood sprayed across his view screen. We're inside, Lisa announced. They flew through tunnels that pulsed like arteries, following Amy's neural maps toward the bioship's brain center. The walls around them were alive, covered in nerve endings that sparked with electricity. Jake felt like he was flying through the belly of some impossible monster. There, Lisa pointed to a chamber ahead of them that glowed with bioelectric energy. That's the central nervous cluster. Jake brought New Horizon to a stop inside the chamber. All around them, nerve bundles as thick as trees carried signals throughout the bioship's body. Lisa activated the biovirus and connected it to the nerve network. Virus uploaded, she announced. It's spreading through the system. Bioship began to convulse around them. The nerve bundles started flashing in chaotic patterns as the virus attacked the creature's shared consciousness. Jake felt the ship shake as the bioship systems began to fail. Time to go, he said. But as they tried to fly back out, the tunnel walls began to close. The bioship was dying, but it was taking them with it. Jake pushed his engines to full power, racing toward the exit as the creature collapsed around them. They almost made it. New Horizon was crushed just as it reached the surface. But not before Lisa's virus had done its work. The bioship's scream was heard across the entire battle zone as its consciousness shattered. The smaller organisms around it began attacking each other in confusion. Captain Torres's replacement, Captain Roy Adams, led his group against the spider-like bioship. His destroyer Phoenix carried another virus payload deep into the creature's body before being dissolved by acid. The virus spread, and another bioship began tearing itself apart. One by one, human ships sacrificed themselves to plant viruses. In the remaining bioships, Commander Alina Foster rammed her cruiser into a jellyfish-like creature's brain center. Lieutenant Captain Mike Chen flew his fighter directly into a bioship's nerve cluster, detonating his reactor core to ensure the virus would spread. But the largest bioship, the one from Avalon, was adapting. It began to isolate the infected sections of its nervous system, cutting them off to prevent the virus from spreading. The creature was learning, evolving, even as the battle raged around it. "It's getting away," Greg announced from his tactical station. The bioship was turning toward hyperspace, preparing to flee and warn others of its kind. Admiral Walker looked at his fleet status. Most of his ships were gone, destroyed in their desperate attacks. Only 50 vessels remained, and they were badly damaged. But the bioship could not be allowed to escape. If it reached other Void Hunters and told them about the virus, humanity's sacrifice would mean nothing. "All remaining ships," Sam announced, "form up on Defiance. We're going after the big one." Sir Paul objected. "We don't have enough firepower to break through its defenses." Sam looked at his old friend. "We don't need firepower, Paul. We just need to get close enough." He activated the ship's intercom system. "All hands, this is the Admiral. Prepare for ramming speed. We're going to plant our virus the hard way." The remaining human ships formed a wedge formation around Defiance and accelerated toward the fleeing bioship. The creature's defenses opened fire, destroying ship after ship. But the humans kept coming, their formation tightening as they approached. Their target. Distance to target, 5,000 meters, Greg reported. 4,000 meters. 3,000. The bioship's weapons were tearing the human formation apart. Only a dozen ships remained, racing towards certain death. 1,000 meters, Greg announced. Sam activated the final biovirus payload and set it to deploy on impact. "It has been an honor serving with all of you." Defiance struck the bioship's hull at full speed. The dreadnought's armored bow punched deep into the creature's body, carrying the virus directly to its central nervous system. The explosion when the ship's reactors overloaded was visible from 3 star systems away. The bioship died with a sound like breaking glass that echoed across hyperspace. Its death scream reached other Void Hunters scattered across the galaxy, warning them that something new had entered the war, something that did not run when faced with impossible odds. In the wreckage of the Centuri gate, a few human escape pods drifted among the debris. The survivors would be rescued by alien ships that had been monitoring the battle from a safe distance. They would tell the galaxy what they had seen, how a handful of humans had destroyed 7 creatures that entire fleets could not touch. The Deathworlders had taken their step forward, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the battle at Centuri Gate, the skies above Earth were filled with ships, but these were not human vessels. They belonged to every major species in the galaxy, all coming to the same place for the same reason. Today was the day they would honor the dead. The memorial wall stretched for 3 kilometers across the plains outside Geneva. It was made of black stone, quarried from Earth's mountains, polished until it reflected the sky like a mirror. Carved into its surface were 50,000 names, one for every human who died fighting the Void Hunters. How the names were arranged not by rank or importance, but by the order in which they had died. Admiral Sam Walker's name was near the bottom, next to the cook from his ship and a young pilot who had never fired a shot in anger before. Centuri Gate. Ambassador Helen Carter stood before the wall, her hand resting on Jake Martinez's name. She had aged in the months since the battle, her hair now completely gray, her face marked by lines that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. The scar on her left cheek was a reminder of her own battles during the evacuation of the core worlds. Around her, representatives from dozens of species waited in respectful silence. The Zephyrian Prime Speaker, Crystalline Formation 7 Alpha, stood nearby. The proud crystal being who had once called humans violent savages now showed cracks in his structure that caught the sunlight like tears. His whole body flickered with Colors that human translators said meant sorrow and shame. The gas-dwelling Nephilims floated in their environmental suits, their forms dim and subdued. The insectoid Chitauri stood in perfect formation, their usual clicking and buzzing replaced by complete silence. Even the proud warrior clans of the Corvan Empire, who had never bowed to anyone, kept their heads lowered in respect. A small human girl named Emma walked up to the memorial wall. She could not have been more than 7 years old, with brown hair and pigtails and a stuffed animal tucked under her arm. Her father, a man named Robert who worked in the colony administration, followed behind her. He walked with a limp from the injuries he had received during the evacuation of Kepler Station. Emma placed a flower at the base of the wall, then looked up at all the names carved in stone. "Daddy," she said in the clear voice that only children have, "why did all these people die?" Robert knelt down next to his daughter. It was the same question that billions of people across the galaxy had been asking. Why did the humans fight when everyone else ran? Why did they sacrifice themselves for beings who had treated them like monsters? Because someone had to, Robert said gently. And humans don't like to see innocent people get hurt. The Zephyrian Prime speaker heard these words and stepped forward. His crystal body flashed with patterns of light as he began to speak. When a Zephyrian spoke at a ceremony like this, it meant something important. For 50 years, 7 Alpha said, his voice like wind chimes in a storm, we feared the humans. We called them Deathworlders and treated them like dangerous animals. We saw only their capacity for violence and ignored everything else about them. He paused, his body shifting to colors that meant regret and acknowledgement. We were wrong. The humans did not fight because they enjoyed killing. They fought because they could not stand by and watch others die. They called us their friends even when we treated them as enemies. They died for us even though we had given them no reason. To care about our survival, the representatives began to speak. The Nephilim ambassador, a being called Flowing Current 9, spoke about the human rescue ships that had saved his people's gas cities when the Void Hunters reached the Orion sector. The Chitauri Queen voice told of human volunteers who had helped evacuate insectoid colonies, working alongside beings who had previously refused to share the same space with Deathworlders. Each story was the same. When the Void Hunters came, humans had stepped forward while everyone else stepped back. Ambassador Helen Carter finally walked to the podium. The crowd fell silent as she began to speak. Her voice carried across the memorial grounds, heard by billions of beings watching the ceremony on view screens throughout the galaxy. The people whose names are on this wall did not see themselves as heroes, she said. They were farmers and teachers, engineers and soldiers, parents and children who found themselves facing the end of everything they loved. They were not fearless. They were terrified. But they did what humans have always done when faced with darkness. They took one step forward. She looked out at the assembled representatives, beings from worlds she had never seen, people who breathed different air and saw different colors but who all understood loss. You called us Deathworlders, Helen continued. You said we were violent and dangerous. You were not entirely wrong. Earth is a dangerous place, and it did make us capable of great violence. But you missed the most important thing about us. The same world that taught us to fight also taught us what is worth fighting for. A recording began to play across the memorial grounds. It was Admiral Sam Walker's final transmission, sent just before the Defiance rammed into the largest void. Hunter, Bioship. His words echoed off the memorial wall and drifted across the assembled crowd. We are not the monsters you thought we were. We are not the saviors you needed us to be. We are simply humans, doing the most human thing of all. We refuse to let the darkness win without a fight. As the recording ended, something unexpected happened. The Zephyrian Prime speaker began to change colors in a pattern that humans had never seen before. Other crystal beings joined him, their bodies flashing in harmony. The Nephilims released clouds of gas that sparkled in the sunlight. Chitauri began a low humming that sounded almost like music. Dr. Maria Santos, Earth's new chief xenobiologist, stood next to Helen and watched in amazement. Maria had replaced Amy Rodriguez as the leading expert on alien cultures, and she had never seen anything like this display. What are they doing? Helen asked quietly. Maria checked her cultural database, then looked up in wonder. It's a mourning ritual, she said, but not for their own dead. They're mourning for ours. I don't think this has ever happened before. Different species joining together to honor another race's sacrifice. The ceremony continued for hours. Representatives from worlds that had never spoken to each other shared stories about human courage. Former enemies stood side by side to remember. People they had once feared. Memorial became something more than just a place to remember the dead. It became a symbol of what the galaxy could be when its people worked together. As the ceremony finally ended and the alien ships began to leave Earth's orbit, young Emma tugged on her father's sleeve again. "Daddy," she said, "are we heroes now?"
Robert
Looked at his daughter, then at the memorial wall with its thousands of names. He thought about Admiral Walker and Captain Martinez, about Dr. Rodriguez and all the others who had given their lives so that a little girl could ask innocent questions under an open sky. "No, sweetheart," he said finally. "We're just human, but sometimes that's enough." Years later, children throughout the galaxy would learn about the Battle of Centuri Gate in their history classes. They would study the tactics and the technology, the politics and the aftermath. But they would also learn something else, something more important than facts and dates. They would learn that when faced with ultimate darkness, when every rational choice pointed toward retreat and survival, a group of beings from a dangerous little world had looked at the impossible and decided to try anyway. They had not won because they were stronger or smarter or more advanced than anyone else. They had won because they were willing to take one step forward when everyone else took one step back, and in the deepest parts of space. Ancient things that had been stirring in their sleep decided to rest a little longer, because now they knew that somewhere in this galaxy, the Deathworlders were watching. And Deathworlders do not yield.